Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a big Green Day fan either
Mm,
way. Like I like Green Day, but I'm not like a super fan. So like I don't know what the community thinks about any of this, but like I don't know, man. I think I've just something's changed in my taste, I guess. April 13th, 1990, we get 39 Smooth, the debut album by Green Day on Lookout Records. Okay, when we did our Green Day rankings, I listened to this, and I think I listened to this right after I listened to Kerplunk. I still stand by that. I don't, at least right now, care
mm,
for Kerplunk. Right? I think this is a far better album. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a big Green Day fan either
mm.
way. Like I like Green Day, but I'm not like a super fan. So like I don't know what the community thinks about any of this, but like I don't know, man. I think I've just something's changed in my taste, I guess, because I literally dreaded listening to this record. As soon as I said we should listen to it, and you were like, "Yeah," I was like, "Cool." And then like the next day, I was like, "Ugh, do I really want to listen to that?" And I put it off for like almost 10 days, and then I played it in my car with my kid because I was like, "Well, I can listen to that album because it's not too
Mhm.
crazy and it won't bother him too much." And I played it and I listened to like the first few songs, and I was like, "Wait a minute." And I was like, dude, what did I not get about? And I think that there's something that's happening with me in the last
Mhm.
year. I think my tastes have changed a little bit, and I just
Mm.
didn't expect it. And it's happening with so many records that I've in the past didn't have a positive opinion on. But what's up, guys? So we just partnered up with Dead and Buried Inc. out of LA. So if you have a band or a small business, maybe an event coming up, and you need merch, hit these dudes up. There's a link in the description. If you mention that you got there via the Punk Rock Review, you'll get 10% off of your first order. But it's super high quality screen printing, embroidery. They do shirts, hats, hoodies, skateboards, bags, whatever you want printed, they can handle it, all right? They're also a small business and they're part of the punk rock community. They're my friends. So this is a partnership that's very important to me. If you need merch, hit these dudes up, check them out. You won't be disappointed, all right? Back to the video. I did write a few things down about this record. I will let you talk about it first for a minute because my notes are not like extensive, but I do want to kind of read them all without stopping, and it's going to take probably like 2 to 3 minutes maybe of reading.
Okay, and so just to set the stage, 39 Smooth, it is their debut album. I think 39 was the working title of it through most of the album. And then for whatever reason, they just started saying smooth, smooth to each other. So they added 39 Smooth to the album, and rock history is made. This album is interesting because it's the only one without Trey Cool. Um, in
That's
their
obvious, actually.
in there, yeah, and that's actually, and it's not really it's not really shade on El Sobrante because I think he's a really good drummer, and these songs, the drumming does not get in the way of any of these songs, but you realize what the secret sauce is in Green Day that this album kind of doesn't have, and it's very much Trey Cool. Um they were weird early on because Larry Livermore, he's talked about this. He felt their sales early on were a little bit hurt because a lot of people really did like Sweet Children. And so people were confused about the name of the band change
Mm.
from so when Green Day started releasing their early stuff, there were Sweet Children fans who just, again, we don't have the internet back then to sort of spell this out for us to explain that was the same band. And he listened to these songs, and this album could have been released in nearly any decade, and it would probably fit it like all the way back to like the 60s, the late 60s. This could be like a garage rock band, and that would work. It'd work in 70s punk. It works in 80s pop. It'd work today in contemporary music. It's a very timeless record that's not really that affected by, I think, any one specific genre other than really pop rock. They were obviously in the Gilman scene and friendly with those guys, and this sounds like what a lot of pop punk would sound like later on, but I don't think it sounds very pop punky at all, really. I think it just kind of sounds like a proto Green Day, if that makes any sense. It just sounds like
I literally have almost that exact same thing
an
written down.
unrefined version of the sound that they would later like kind of perfect. And it's funny because there's a few songs on here. I have it specifically written down. Going to Pasquale. That song sounds like songs that hadn't been written yet by bands that would be influenced by Green Day. Like not a lot of their catalog actually sounds like those type of pop punk songs that you generally associate the genre, but there is a lot more of that, I think, in these earlier albums than we think of, because we think of the Green Day sound I think has been so refined from like Nimrod or from Dookie to American Idiot, and we think of that as like the heart of the Green Day sound. But a lot of their reputation as a pop punk band and all that stuff comes from these albums, and you hear some of those proto influences. And I really just think this, similar to the last album, it's a perfect debut album in that it's the distillation of the band without one of their key members. And what Green Day, the funny thing about them is I think the production really helped Green Day. I'm not one who.
Hold on one second. I'm so sorry.
Good.
Do what? Yeah, baby, I'm working right now. Parker, you have to hang out with him. I'm not going to do this again. Next time you're giving me your phone.
Okay.
All right, Parker, go brick until I'm done, baby. Hey, can you help me with him? Yeah, and then it just goes in his room and shuts the door and doesn't do anything with him. I'm like, dude, this shit is. Yeah. No, dude, dude, these kids are getting to the age where I'm like, all right, y'all about to understand what parenting really is. I'm not going to fucking play with y'all, man. Anyway, sorry to cut you off like that. That was incredibly rude. I apologize.
Okay, I will say that like Green Day's a band that I wouldn't necessarily worship their unsigned stuff before their signed stuff. So I think them, and really that comes down to I think their producer Rob Cavallo was just a really good fit with bringing out bringing out that Dookie sound to make that real strong Green Day sound. I think they sound a little too nice and too meek on these earlier albums. They don't quite sound, and maybe they hadn't matured into these snotty, bratty kids that they were sort of known for. They're not that yet. And so I actually, even though I like these songs and I think I recognize the talent and they're very catchy, to me, there's something non-Green Day about those two albums because they don't quite have that like snot that they have in those later albums.
So one thing that I've always thought is okay, it's a very contradicting thought.
Mm-hmm.
Green Day always kind of sounds like Green Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there's definitely like Lookout Green Day, Dookie Nimrod Green Day, American Idiot Green Day, and now there's this later on Green Day that's got like this garage rocky weird sound that they did with the Father of All in their latest record that have a lot more in common than people want to admit. This album, like, okay, I'll tell you what. I'm just gonna read this real fast because I had all my thoughts gathered in one place. So like, okay, so the vocals, they weren't as nasally yet, which I really like for Green Day. They were a different kind of vocal. It was still very clearly him singing, and he did a few things that he does later in his career that obviously is Billy Joe. But his vocals were much more clear, projected vocals without having like this weird nasally style that he developed. The production was really good on this record for what it was. Like you mentioned the producer, but like the guitar tone, there's a timelessness and also a time stamp on this guitar tone. Like it made me feel like I was in the 90s, dude. I literally was like, damn, this feels like when I was a kid, man. Like this sound just reminds me of like Walkmans and Sam Goody and Coca-Cola and like my mom's work truck that I used to have to wash. And like, you know what I'm saying? Like it just they reminded me of like, you know, pre-internet, it reminded me of playing outside. Like the guitar tone reminded me of Friends, that stupid TV show. Like it reminded me
I was going to say TV shows. A lot of these songs remind me of TV themes from the 90s. Of just like the sound of commercials back then. These songs sound like.
One thing that I wrote that's probably going to irritate some purists, I guess, but I don't really care. I wonder why this band was ever considered punk. This album is just more evidence that they are just a great rock and roll power pop band. Great songwriting and vocal melodies, fantastic musicians, of course. Literally nothing about Green Day at this point was punk from my perspective. Lyrically, no. Visually, no. Maybe because they were hanging around the punk scene and were fans of punk rock. That doesn't mean you make punk rock. To be clear, I don't care if you call them punk, and that is very, very, I don't give a shit. Call them whatever you want. But this is just a thought that I had when I was listening to the record. But I ride the fence pretty hard when it comes to that topic of, you know, whether or not to call them a punk band. So call them what you want. They've always been a great band, but you know, even on albums that I don't really care for, it's objectively good music. You know what I'm saying? And I understand their relevance, but listening to this, I was like, how did they ever get put into the punk category? Like nothing, because I don't think Dookie sounds like a punk album to me. Like Nimrod has the most punk sound as far as I am concerned with Green Day. So like their attitude gets punk later with like American Idiot and shit, but they were just like a rock band. And if you ask Green Day, they've never called themselves a punk band.
so they get called punk for the most obvious reason is they were a Gilman Street band.
Right,
So,
but that
so the
doesn't
Gil
mean they're punk though.
no, and Gilman had more, but like they again, and they were on the popular. We've talked about this a lot. They were on the popular side of the Gilman Street bands,
Right,
and one of the things that the Gilman crowd didn't like about them is that they, even though they're from some small, they're from a town I think very similar to like where I live now, where it's like kind of a hick town suburb outside of like a big city, so a very uncool part of like big California. But for whatever reason, their music, because of it, I think its tone and stuff, would find like the suburb kids from like the real Ritz parts of town. So those kids would come out to the Gilman shows, and the Gilman
piss
faithful
off
were
all
like,
the punk kids.
yeah, well, who the hell are these guys? And Ian Winwood's book, he either quoted someone or he said this, and I think he made a good point. He said Green Day were punks who were in the punk scene who played pop music, whereas like guys like the Offspring weren't punks, but they played punk music in the scene. And I think that's probably a
That's
good way
valid.
of remedy. I think though, like again, so I don't think that's like, so this I think sounds like an original sound. It sounds like whatever Green Day. Again, kind of a contradictory thought. I do think Dookie and those records sound like a popified version of like a certain kind of 80s punk. I do understand that pop punk framing there, but we've talked about it many times. Green Day is a very different band than a lot of these other bands that we talk about, and how their presentation. I think ultimately, because they are, of all the bands associated with punk, they're the most commercially successful. They're sort of like,
Right.
they're like the legacy of punk, and like as history will go down and all that. And it is funny because they spent 10 years with everyone who was related to punk hating them. Nobody, we talk about the crap at Jawbreaker took. No one took crap in music history worse than Green Day did for
Right.
signing to a major.
They still take crap from people, dude.
They honestly, they took it for a lot of other bands that got to do that a lot more peacefully years after.
Dude, I had a guy in my live stream dying on this hill, bro. He was telling me that I was out of my mind when I said that a band like Green Day and bands like Offspring getting as big as they got affected street punk. And I'm like, dude, even now, people can't accept the fact that those bands blowing up helped bands exist that might not have existed and certainly wouldn't have been as popular as they were and accessible as they were. So, like, you got bands that you wouldn't have gotten because of these bands. And, like, whether they're punk or not is a stupid ass conversation. It just happens so much that I kind of think of it all the time. Like, on a Monday, I might go, yeah, Green Day's punk rock. And then on a Tuesday, I might go, nah, I don't hear anything about it. Because it's like, sonically, I don't feel like I hear anything about it. They don't look like they're punk, but, like, their attitude is most certainly punk rock. So, like, I think that's the gray line that they walk, the gray area that they, habitate is that the right word? Yeah.
Inhabit.
Inhabit.
Yeah.
Thank you, bro. My brain is like, got him again. But that's where they hang out. Is in this weird gray area where like they're very much of that ilk, but like their music isn't necessarily. It's more akin to like Beach Boys music, and you're like, oh, it's like good pop rock and roll, but like, and they're also at the same time like we're gonna do whatever the fuck we want, which is very punk rock. So like,
and I've had that thought a lot over the years. Like, so normally when you and I have this conversation, I turn my brain off because I hate the what is punk and what is not punk conversation.
Yeah.
But with Green Day, I think it's a lot more intellectually honest, because I think there's like, you look at their debut album and you look at a lot of this stuff, it doesn't necessarily have those trimmings of punk. With that said, I think that they were just almost like burdened with punk in that, because of their fame was like, you're a punk band from this punk scene that got, you're responsible for all this. Everyone from your scene maybe hates you. You have to bring, like, people are going to judge punk rock based on what you do. Like, so for better or worse, they are like, I don't know if the flag bearer necessarily, because I don't think they're the standard for punk, and they would never even claim, I think, to be that. But there's,
I don't know. They might be because of stuff that has nothing to do with punk. Because like you said, it's other people doing this, not punk rockers. So like, can you imagine if they were on a different label that wasn't Lookout with the exact same record? The exact same record came out, but they were from, let's say, Seattle or even Chicago, right? They're from one of these other cities. They weren't on Lookout, but they had the exact same sound. You're telling me that people wouldn't have called them punk if they were like hanging out with Alkaline Trio? Are you fucking kidding me? Of course they would have been called punk rock, dude, because Alkaline Trio got called punk rock, and they sound incredibly similar when you take out the vocals. You just listen to the music. There's a ton of similarities, right? Similar. Okay, people don't get all mad. Similar, like just like fast rock and roll with a lot of pop, but it's got like a little snarl behind it. That's all I mean. Okay, so like Lawrence Arms has a lot of similarities, but they're not the same band. Okay. But like, if you take away Lookout and you take away Gilman and you just go, hey, Green Day, I think that's what pisses people off, is that they're from Gilman. When you think of Gilman, you think of Operation Ivy, you think of Filth, you think of Crimshine, you think of Grimple even. Like, you think of all these bands, you don't think of like poppy sounds. But in reality, all those bands, dude, Grimple's music, go listen to Grimple up your ass, dude. Hella pop. Go listen to my interview with Greg. He talks about how cool Green Day was when they played. Their shows were awesome. You can tell that he doesn't give a shit, that he just want to have a good time and play great music. Like, their pop is important. Pop sounds are important because that's what you get. Do people that listen to like just blast beats over fucking grindcore music, like, dude, there's a reason why that shit will never be popular. It's like you can't make a living doing that because it's not objectively good. I guess I think,
Well,
whatever.
it's
But like,
just yeah, and
it's
I think
abrasive to a degree that
a lot
gets
of
people
popular music is based on abrasive music and taken. I mean, that's a lot of what Green Day does. Is they take pieces from more abrasive music and put it in there. The thing with that is too, and there's two things you're talking about. I think the Gilman thing is important. So I think people like me and my generation have so much reverence for like everything Gilman because it's like it's basically the cradle of everything I like. Comes out of either Gilman
I
or
feel that.
LA. From what I get, and again, I wasn't there at the time. So, but
Right.
everything I have researched at the time seems to be within the underground punk scene, Gilman was very disliked. Because again, Gilman is for the Operation Ivies, for the Green Day, for the bands that the girls like, that the younger kids like, that are under 21, that are a little more silly, that have a lot of these poppy tones that come out of the Gilman. Like I think someone was talking about one of the more heavier bands from Gilman and talking about how it's funny, it was almost a reverse scene. They didn't fit in at Gilman because they were more of a conventional punk band. And all the you have Green Day shows and Operation Ivy shows, and kids are on tricycles in the middle of the circle pit at Gilman. It's just so, from the way it's been presented, like the Dead Kennedys fan, the Black Flag fan, he's like 28 in 1990, and he thinks all this Gilman stuff is horrible. And then he sees the Gilman stuff be the stuff that's capitalized, that becomes like the famous stuff, and that guy really hates that stuff.
Part of it is that when you're like 25 to 28, you really hate kids. Like, you hate them.
Yeah.
You hate teenagers because you're just out of that. So like, when you said all the tricycle thing, my first thought was this club down here called Trip Six, and I was like, oh yeah, like Trip Six, they have ramps in their club, and I fucking hate it. I'm 43, dude, but if I was 18, I think that shit was amazing. I'd be in there skateboarding while I'm listening to punk bands play. So like, punk is very much a youthful movement. People like me need to exist because I'm a lifer that's got adult money now, and I can do things to help out the scene. But the people that are crucial to punk every day are the people that are young. So it changes every year. It's a different group of people that are incredibly important. What Green Day is or is not, I don't care. Are they good? I think that they are a good band. I think they've got far more good music than they do bad music. I don't know why I didn't like this album so much, because when I listened to it today, I really had a great time listening to it. One thing I wrote down that I would like to hear your response to is like, I can only imagine being a major label head and hearing this debut record. I would have been foaming at the fucking mouth. Can you imagine hearing this and being like, oh shit, I see what this is fixing to be, and being like, hey guys, come over here, and they're like, hey, we're chilling over here. I'm like, no, gotta come sign this contract. I'd have been trying to shark them motherfuckers, dude. Like, because I can hear it from a 90s perspective. I can listen to it because I was alive in the 90s, so I know how people behaved, and I'm like, man, I wish I'd have heard this record when I was really young, because I didn't hear this until way later in life. I heard this probably post Nimrod. Like, Nimrod is like when I started going, okay, I think I really do like this band. I went back and found the first two records, and I don't really think they ever really resonated with me. But if I had heard this first, I might have liked it a lot way back when. But I'm coming from that. I have to say that a lot, because a lot of bands, I hear them from their popular music, and I have to go back into their discography. And it's just, it is what it is, man. It's the way of the world for me.
Yeah, so the major label thing's interesting because they didn't, kind of like we were talking about Jawbreaker, they didn't play nice with major labels for a really long time. And in fact, they were the ones who tipped off Rancid that, like, hey, there was an A&R guy that dyed his hair green to come to our meeting. And so they were Green Day was really important in, like, they would get info.
That would be so annoying.
Yeah. Imagine how disingenuous.
Cringe. That's cringe. That's the definition of cringy.
Like, if you're going to be a label guy, just be your old label guy stuff. Wear your cowboy boots, sign me, great. We'll shake hands. We'll have the boot. But if you're going to, like, pretend to be cool punk rocker, dude, like,
he's probably wearing a suit still.
Yeah, that is the lamest thing ever, which is why it wasn't until, again, we talked about it earlier, until Rob Cavallo came around, who is like, He's this punk rocker dude who's an A&R producer at the label who's about to get fired because none of his bands are hits because he keeps signing these underground bands that don't take off. And then
Pause real fast. When you
yeah,
said that a second ago about the guy down his hair green, my brain went straight to Rob Lowe in Wayne's World. Dude, I thought I
well,
was
the
like,
same time
yeah,
period, yeah,
like
yeah.
the guy in Wayne's World, bro.
I think that's such a good service that Green Day did by passing that story along to all the other bands in the scene.
Dude, for real.
So it really, like Rancid had talked about it, they were a lot more selective with like the meetings they took because of Green Day's experience of going through all this. But yeah, absolutely. If you would have heard, because this sounds more like mid 90s in my, again, because I wasn't there. So again, this probably stuff was more in the underground, but I wasn't there. This sounds like the mid 90s stuff that would have been popular. I have no reason to think that if this had a major label backing, maybe it's not as big as Dookie or some of those other albums. It would have been a hit though, without a doubt. If this thing gets
I
mass
think so.
distributed,
Well,
especially with like a younger crowd, I think they would have really taken this. Now, the only thing I don't think is on there is like that one maybe big song that would
I
have been
agree with
like
that.
the
Well,
big hit.
I think the whole album is a higher quality than that, though. There's not a lot of filler on this record. That's the
Right.
issue. Is that like when you have an album that doesn't have any filler, but it doesn't also have like a fucking crazy, very clear banger.
Mhm.
Everything's just like an 8 out of 10. You're like, oh, well, where's the hit? It's like the whole album is the hit because the only song I didn't really care for is Rest.
Mhm.
Other than that, the whole record is really good.
And that's the only song that's a departure too, I think, of all the songs on the
Right,
album. That's one
right,
that's like
right,
way
right.
out of left field. Yeah.
Well, then you have like Judge's Daughter. I think that could have been a good song because it has a
Mhm.
crazy guitar solo in it, and that I think could have set them apart. I think that song is the one that stuck out to me the most. But I wanted to tell you this, dude. I wrote this down. I know I said it earlier, but I wrote it down earlier. I guess earlier in the week, and I didn't realize that I'd written it down. But it's funny that I basically parroted this earlier. I said this album is one I've notoriously not liked in the past. What is happening to me over the last year or so? And I put LOL. All my tastes are shifting, more like they're broadening, I guess. It's wild. People just change, I guess. What the fuck are people going to say about this? And that's what I wrote down because, like, I think the one thing that I like about myself is that I'm willing to just eat it, bro. It is what it is, and it makes for a great conversation. I enjoy the comments, even when they're negative towards me sometimes. Overall, I get a pretty positive response, but I got called a poser the other day by some guy because he thinks that I just discovered oi music, and I was like, boy, you haven't paid much attention, but all right, yeah, sure, whatever, buddy. Like, the comments are a pretty fun place to hang out
So
sometimes, but
so what's the rule on there? In order to not be a poser, you have to discover something, study it in the monastery for 20 years, and then present it on YouTube, right?
yeah, you have to be like when you're 10 years old and you've never heard of punk rock, you still have to understand what it is. You have to wear like either boots or Converse at age like 11. Anything past 12 and you're not wearing strictly band tees and you have absolutely a mohawk throughout your whole school, like everything, 6th grade through 12th, right? You better have a tattoo before you're out of school. You better have some piercings. You better get expelled. And you better not like the casualties. Other than that, you know, yeah, there's a bunch of fucking rules, dude. I'm learning these rules as I
I,
go on with this YouTube thing.
I can check boxes on both sides of those. So
Well, like it's just so silly, bro.
it's dumb.
People get so mad at me because I like Blink-182's older material, and I'm like, bro, I've bashed Blink-182 on this channel more than I've praised them. Like, give me a break, dude. Like, who cares what I like other than like it's my channel? Like, I don't understand this. Scroll through YouTube and you go, huh, a video about Green Day. I hate that band. Click. Like, what are you? Why would you watch a video? Like, if somebody watches this conversation that hates Green Day, why? Please tell me why. Is it because you like Rob and I? If that's the case, okay, I kind of understand that. But even then, like topically, you want to waste your whole half hour listening to us talk about a band you don't like?
That is funny, especially on something like this where we're not really engaging the audience in like this hot take about the band. Say if you
No.
hated the band and we had we had something crazy on the thumbnail, why would you watch that? Like
Right.
two
The
nerds
thumbnail's
talking
gonna
about
be like debut album from important pop punk band, like or something, pop punk pioneers debut album, and then it'll have like a question mark or something with like a blurred out vision, image of the album cover where it's very clearly Green Day. Like it's just a nice looking generic thumbnail. Like I don't have the hot topic shit. I hate it, dude. I don't. I almost went that direction early on in my career doing this stuff, and I'm so glad that I decided to go with just reviewing music and talking about shit I like. Because, dude, to keep up with being like
algorithm stuff.
bombastic all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
well, like, okay, look, dude, I'm gonna preface this with saying this is not shit talking. There's no ill will here. It is just an observation. Have you seen Dan Frampton's stuff lately?
No, whenever he makes punk rock content, it will come up on my thing. But
Okay, so he like I guess he like shifted over to doing this like bad boy of YouTube stuff, and he has this new shtick where he wears like a leather jacket and he's sunglasses, and I guess he's like I know it's a shtick. I know that he's like that guy, so I understand that it's like a character, right? But I feel like if he would just like pump the brakes and go into the more thoughtful content, that he would get over this little lull he's having. He got like a weird, stupid dude. He got screwed, man. Like he got screwed over because he got a terms of service strike, and that will get you shadow banned. Like you can't do that. And he got it for bullying, but I don't. What I saw wasn't. I didn't consider it bullying. So I am on Dan's team here. For anybody that's wondering, like that's my friend at this
yeah,
point.
you
Like
guys
we're
are
not like
friends.
we're not best friends, but like we're buddies, man. That's my dude. I got no issue with anything he does. I just see it and go, I wonder if that's the right path. But I mean, what am I talking about? He's got 60% more subscribers, 70% more subscribers than I've got. So what do I know? But like I do wonder, like, man, is that the right path to take? And I don't really know how to address it other than just to voice it on a channel, a video. Maybe somebody will say something to him and he'll hit me up, or maybe he'll take it the wrong way. I don't fucking know.
Well, and so like not so much on this show, but like on the other podcast I host, not related to punk rock. I do feel like I play a bit of a character on there, and not really, it's just like an exaggerated version of myself. But people who have never met you would probably not be surprised to find out you're not playing a character on any media. That this is who you are at like 6 a.m. This is who you are at 9 p.m. This is kind of who you are all the time.
Yeah, I don't have the energy to play a character, man, because I don't have to keep it up when I'm not like.
You're too much of a character naturally, to be honest. You bring a lot of energy all the time, right?
I've been told that. I didn't want to say it myself because that feels kind of arrogant and patting myself on the back.
Though, but
I appreciate it. I didn't want to say that myself, but like I've been told, like, yeah, you're good for this because you're kind of a wild dude. You're polarizing, and I think that's pretty accurate. And so, and I got a lot of respect for Dan, man. He takes a lot of shit from people, and his character is his character. I mean, I just saw it and I was surprised. And we had talked a little bit, and I knew that he was dealing with like lulls in viewership, and I was like, dude, I think he's like trying to force the algorithm to pick his stuff up, and I don't know if you can do that. So it's an interesting experiment.
Was on the brand new get like them reassembling. So
wait, what? The band brand new?
Yeah. So I think he's hitting on this top. I mean, if I was making like current, I guess, music content, that's probably what I would make a video on like today. So I think he's kind of hitting that current stuff.
Yeah, well, he's always kind of stayed on like hot topic issues and stuff. Like he'll cover stuff that I won't cover, which makes him that's good. I think if we both covered exactly the same stuff, we would have it would be boring.
Like the same content.
Yeah, man. Like I like that we're a little different. We're different people.
Yeah, he's good at covering feuds. I think that's really his specialty. Is like when people when things have beef with each other, he's good at sort of chronicling that.
I will say this: he said, "I love making schlock." He said this shit on my channel, and I was like, "Interesting," because I don't. It is exhausting to me. And so whenever I saw him do this stuff, I was like, "Oh, he's leaning into his that's his jammy jam, dude. That's his stuff." Which again, I just don't necessarily understand it. I should probably just hit him up and go, "Hey, what's up with this?" Like, because I don't have a problem with it. I'm a little curious, and I wonder if it's like working. I hope it is. I hope it's getting him I hope it's getting him back where he was. I know he was just stressing out, bro. That strike thing would have really fucked me up, man. I'm glad I didn't have to deal with that. I thought he got kind of screwed.
Yeah, because that messes up the whole visibility of your channel and
man. I think it's bogus what he got hit with the TOS thing is like for bullying. He was talking about. I think he was talking about Logan Paul, bro. What are we talking about? That guy is a scumbag. Why can't we talk shit about him? Like, what are we doing? But yeah, man. Back to Green Day.
Yeah. I
don't even remember how we got on Dan for a minute. I don't remember.
Yeah, so we're talking about making it big or classic music or something, and it somehow snowballed into this. What do you think? Do you get a little okay? So my favorite songs on this album tend to be songs like 16, I Was There, Road to Acceptance. They're more melancholy, reflective ones, but this is where the time that has passed actually kind of hurts this album just a little. Like there's an earnestness about being 17 and wishing that your youth was still with you and all that good stuff. But it is a little hard to take with these guys again that are like in their 60s now. Like, I wonder how they look back on those songs, like honestly, and not from a way of it. Well, because a lot of this album, again, Road to Acceptance, I Was There, those songs, they're like these reflective songs about this bygone era. But again, they wrote it when they were 17. So I'm
Yeah.
sure they still have those reflections of that bygone era and it still feels the same. It's just funny to me how like earnest they sound in those in those things that I don't know if I'm doing the thing that people do to pop punk sometimes where it feels like the stakes are kind of low in what they're singing about. And I kind of feel that way just like it gets a little bit almost like nauseating of like how much of these songs were just like time has passed, things are never going to be the same. You know what I mean? It's a little too
Well,
melancholy for like just being 17 from in my
I
opinion.
disagree. I think that in the '90s there was a lot of this kind of feeling going on. There was
Mhm.
a lot of mystery to what's going to happen to you in the next 5 to 10 years because you're young and we didn't have the internet, and there was a lot of reason to like just be like honestly worried, like
Mhm.
nervous, and you felt unprepared. And I look at this as a chapter in their lives, and I think the songs are just as good now as they were then. And I don't look at it like I look at bands as an example. When I listen to like Let's Go, that
Mhm.
Rancid album, for anybody who's wondering, I don't listen to that record and go, huh, they're Tim Armstrong's 57 still playing this. I'm like, no, 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 dude, this is what they were feeling in 1993. This is what they were feeling when they were young men. And I can put myself back into that. And I think that this is what reminiscing is all about. This is
Mhm.
what, I don't like to think about the past very often. I always like to think about right today, right now, in the future. But whenever I have time to think about the past, it's best done with music because
Absolutely.
you can play a song, it'll put you back in a memory, it'll put you back in a time and a place. And there's girls that I don't like to think about, and so there's songs that when I hear them, I don't want to hear the songs. It puts me in that frame of mind, right? But sometimes I'd like to think about like my old relationships, not in like a romantic way, but like just like or romantic in like
The time of your life. Yeah.
romanticizing being young. And I'm like, man, that was a good time, dude. That girl sucked, but I had a good time, man. My friends were cool, man. I had good music, and she sucked and she broke my heart, but that's why I ended up writing this song. That's why I ended up meeting these people because I went to the bar and hung out. And so, like, listening to these songs do that to me. And this one has a feel of a 1992 sound. It's like a
Mhm.
time capsule on disc, man. It's pretty interesting.
Um, and I do think Green Day, and I have that's something else I have in my notes. I do think they are the best ever lyrically at communicating that feeling though of like it sucks to like a lot of punk music is that sort of thesis of it sucks to grow up. But I think in their late like I just don't think they do as good of a job on this album as they would do
Well, they were all kids still, so I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
so to me there is a certain and again like I think framing it of how they feel about it's probably the wrong way because they probably if I get any piece of artwork or something I did when I was 17, I would have a certain sentimental and a attachment to those feelings because I will know those feelings
Well,
were real because
and
I
like a
really had them.
testament. You'll love it and have like sentimental value to it, but you'll also go, ugh.
Yeah. And I do think that is Green Day. Green Day has two lyrical lanes, and they're both actually the basis to every song on this album, which is really that angst about growing up. And you talk about it going into the 90s. I mean, there's all kinds of research on that. That's the end of history era, and people really did think we solved like humanity in the 90s. So what the hell? Like all that was left was for the world to end or whatever. You know what I mean? It's a lot different
Dude,
than the 2000s. We've just seen chaos, and we just sort of live with chaos. It's a little bit. We're just like no, the end of the world is happening. It's just going to take like 100 years. That's kind of been our mentality in the
you remember
2000s.
you remember Y2K?
Oh yeah, I
That
remember my
shit was,
stepdad
dude,
going to the
look,
freezer and loading up all the meat and all that stuff.
dude, I'm gonna be real honest, man. On Y2K, I was terrified. I was
Yeah.
like, what's fixing to happen, man? And because I'm easy to rile up and I over worry about everything. So like you can just whisper in my ear and it'll fuck up a whole month of my life. So like uh
I think it's
yeah,
great
man.
that we were afraid of Y2K, but the next 20 years would be much worse than whatever we thought was going to happen on
Man,
Y2K.
man, we're in a hot mess right now, dude. We are in a mess right now.
Which is why music will always be relevant, no matter it'll always have something to say. Like there is so often when I will find music that's older that feels like it fits the current moment. And it's like they didn't write that about that. That wasn't inspired by it, but it's like they get it, even if they didn't get that. That these as much
Well,
as the world seems to change, yeah, I think human emotions and feelings are kind of universal.
history repeats itself.
Mm-hmm.
So timeless music will always be relevant. This is
Mm-hmm.
why bands like Green Day are important. This is why American Idiot is got this like resurgence whenever uh
Every
Trump
time
came into
a
office.
Republican gets elected, I feel like American Idiot gets into the top 10.
Yeah, that and like No Effects songs start to be more popular again.
Yeah, if I,
Um,
if I was Green Day, I would just start donating money on the slide to the RNC. That way, my albums could stay gold forever.
like, dude, yeah, man, I just ugh. So the two songs that I like the most, okay, the
Mhm,
whole album, the only song that I didn't care for was Rest, but the two songs that really stuck out to me were Don't Leave Me and The Judge's Daughter. I also think Why Do You Want Him was one that had another guitar part that I really liked in it. Um, it's a strong record, man. I think
mhm.
both of these albums are going to hover around 8.5 to me, whereas like just 1 year ago, I would have probably given them both a 5 or lower, which I think is pretty amazing, man.
Yeah, I think we need to like whenever we create Punk Rock U, we need to make people listen to this album as a debut album just to get the full context of Green Day and just to get the full thing because I think it does answer a lot of questions. The early I tend to go away from the early two albums more than I probably should. And I think they're a little more important than that, not only to their evolution, but like you got to remember they're a big band even when they were an underground band. So this stuff is
Yeah.
still also it's not just Dookie that like all those bands that came out in '94, they didn't get inspired by Dookie and write albums. A lot of
Well,
them were already around, and this stuff is around, and so this stuff is popping. Dookie is just the bomb that sets everything off. I will say, Disappearing Boy is one that I have always loved, and it's one that I feel like could have been one of their hits like years later. Like it's the first time they're really being ironic in the things they're saying and really catchy and cute in their lyrics. Another one that I mentioned it a few times is I really like Road to Acceptance. Now it's kind of a long song, and the beginning I don't like Billy's vocal performance. I think he was trying something a little bit different, and it's a little acapella, and it just kind of it doesn't get to me. But then as it goes, it starts like just digging in. It starts digging into me, and to me, like that song, maybe if they because I think they recorded this, in true punk rock style in like 2 days or something like that when they
yes,
actually
that's what
tracked
it
it.
said. It said 2 days on the Wikipedia page.
Yeah, I think Road to Acceptance, had they had a little more time, is a song they could have built into one of those kind of big Green Day hit kind of songs. It has a lot of different little parts in it, the way like Longview and some of those bigger songs that they have. I don't know about Rest. I think it's a cool kind of song. It just
I
doesn't
don't like it.
really blend in on this album. I've written down it's like a song from a weird Woodstock band, and it's odd. And I like again, so this song or a Rest or like the title track song, title band song, Green Day, they're more of a stoner band than a hardcore drug band. So
Yeah.
instead of like being
Yes.
a band on acid and so much alcohol like all these other bands in the punk scene, they're more like stoners. So they have a lot of songs about, whether it's Brain Stew, Longview, Green Day, of just being like really high and sitting in your room and trying to figure, like, as they're having old anxiety about growing up, they're really stoned and watching reruns in their room. And that just sounds like the early 90s in so many like you wonder why
Yes.
they're sort of the avatar of like early 90s slacker culture. I think they're actually a much better avatar than like,
Slacker culture is a very good description
yeah,
of
and the
like
90s is
the
kind of the
sound.
slacker era. And I think people associate that with like the Kurt Cobain kind of like grungy dude, but I think this is the middle of the like this is more of I think of the culture of that time. Green Day, even though this is early 90s, but their entirety of the 90s, and we've talked about this a few times. I think they capture a lot of that moment. And you said it's timeless, but they are very much a cultural moment. Especially in the 90s. I think after that, they kind of just sound like their own thing, or they're sort of
Right.
pioneers and other people.
Well,
But
they
really,
have
in the
their own sound. There is a Green Day template, but people, it's just like, dude, there's a few bands like that, man. Green Day, Rancid does it, where you can try to copy them, but you're not going to sound like them
well, and
because
after
Rancid has like Tim, Lars, and Matt, which you can't replicate that. This is a very unique sound.
40
But
years of
so,
yeah,
so is Billy Joe, Trey Cool, and Mike Dirnt. They have a specific like chemistry between the three of those guys. Uh, honestly, Blink 182, even when they make songs I don't care about, they have a chemistry that you can't really replicate. This is why when Matt Skiba came in, who I think is a superior, or not, maybe not superior, but equal songwriter, it didn't sound the same and people didn't care for it as much because there was a chemistry that was missing. Dude, do you hear that they played a show together and they played some
yeah,
songs with all four of them?
yeah.
I'm
I
so
watched that footage.
sad that I did.
I,
Oh,
I was shocked that you weren't like reporting that like it was breaking news in the middle, and then you were having people on to react.
dude,
That was like CNN for you.
I've been so busy, dude. I didn't even know it happened.
I watched the clip just so I figured we would. I don't remember if it was like a couple weeks ago because I knew I would have to talk about it on the show. I'm stunned that you didn't because you have so much passion about that whole scenario. I thought that was
I
really
do.
I was expecting to look at the comments and just to be like, "F you, punk rock review." I told you they get along. I was expecting that. Everyone was like, "Oh,
No,
cool, how
dude,
awesome that is."
I think that I still stand behind what I said about it all. I still think that it's just been resolved, which is fine too. Why wouldn't it get resolved? They're adults, but they
Mm.
should have resolved it, and they did. Okay, I don't understand the controversy
Well,
behind that, but
I think it was very, very specific that they did a fundraiser show and had that be the hook. Because
right.
like you've been pointing out for a while, you wanted to see when Blink reformed with Tom, you thought it would be an awesome if they did a world tour and Alkaline Trio was the support band, and basically to do a bit of a set like that. They did. This is
Yeah,
probably as close as we're ever going to really get to that. But I think
because they're not like the best of friends. Let's be honest. Like it's because they're not like, I just want to hang out with you all the time. They could do that with no problems if they really wanted to. No problems.
maybe I think it's a little bit, it might be more of a like too much of a gimmick and too much of a talking point for a tour.
No,
That
just one tour. No, bro, do like
you don't think
20
that would
dates.
suck in every interview they sit down for? Well, what is it like now that you guys? I
Yeah,
think that would
okay, but the
wear
thing
them
is,
out.
like, but that's the interview they got anyways. Whenever they broke up, whenever they had Matt come on, whenever Matt left, they still got that. So that's the interview because that's what they've been. That's what they did as a man, as musicians, as artists. That they did that. They did those things. They did change like that. So of course they're gonna get those questions. That's not why they're not doing it. They're not doing it because, and I'm not saying that they're like enemies. I'm just saying
What
like they're
evidence do you
not.
have
They're
that they don't
not.
get along though? That's you're the only person that's ever put that out there.
I'm not saying that they like argue and hate each other. I'm just saying everybody is telling me, no, dude, they're like really great friends. I'm saying that sounds like bullshit to me. If they were really great friends, then they would have already had this figured out because it's too perfect. It makes too much sense. It's right there. And it's like, dude, if okay, you're telling me that if you and I we got like famous doing this podcast, right? You had to go bounce, take care of your kiddo. I then hang out with Nitty for a while, right? I
Mhm.
come back. I ask, are you have some free time again? I ask you to come on, and then hey, would you want to do like a couple of shows with Nitty? Like if me and you just hated each other, or if you just hated Nitty, that would never happen, right? But if you were good friends with him and you were like, hey, I think I like that guy, it wouldn't be hard to do it. You'd be like, yeah, why not? Like it's not the same, but it's like,
But
it,
I think you think of the way you and I think of Skiba, and I don't think that's the way that everybody thinks of that whole. Like
what do you
it's
mean?
not. I just think like
Hmm.
the Blink 182
That
Skiba
that I
era.
think he's great. Not everybody thinks he's
Yeah,
great.
and
Okay.
I like yeah, like you said, I prefer 90% of what he's done over anything Blink 182 has done, just because
Right.
I like Alkaline Trio better than Blink.
That's a
But
valid point.
I don't think all of that and is that important to a lot of people.
Except that if they were actually the friends that people say that they are, it wouldn't matter
But do
because they
you
would
think?
be.
But you're just assuming Alkaline Trio wants to be a support band on a major tour where like you're just assuming that too. Like it's not like that proposal was out there and they turned that
It
down.
takes a lot of assumptions to make comments like this. Yeah, it's an
No.
assumption. That is, yeah, I didn't. I mean, like most of the stuff that we talk about that's not on paper is assumption based. Like
Sure.
like it's like you know, the reason that I say it wouldn't be hard is because look at what Green Day and Rancid did. We all know that they're friends.
Mhm.
And then they were like, hey, want to come tour? Yeah, sure. Do you
I,
think
I
Rancid couldn't have headlined their own tour and done just as well? Of course they
yeah,
could have. But like,
but
why not
yeah,
go out with the homies?
I love that tour though because I got so much photos of like Tim and Lars with other musicians I really like that they would never have got photo ops with had they not been on tour with Green Day. And
What do
there's
you mean?
this like so like there's the one photo of it's
Sorry.
like my whole algorithm is together. There is a photo of James Hetfield, CM Punk, Tim Armstrong
Oh yeah, I've
hanging
seen
out,
that.
laughing and talking, and I was like, that's a photo that only exists because Rancid was on this tour with. I mean,
Yeah, that is weird.
the Metallica and Rancid guys have been friendly for a lot of years. They come from the same area. That
Yeah, and Lars loves wrestling, so he's like his best friend, CM Punk, I think.
yeah, and it was just funny though because like, and there was a lot of other little things where you would see people shouting out Rancid and like Rancid is kind of they were kind of on that tour the legendary opening band that kind of comes like
Yeah.
when you're a kid you see a band you have no idea who these legends are. That was probably what that was to a lot of people. So I loved that tour for all the photo ops and all that like all the places that Rancid got to be. And I wonder for them, how cool was it to play? How short were their sets? Probably the shortest sets they'd played in
Dude, they
years,
were like
right?
24 minutes or some crazy shit. I was
Yeah.
like, what the fuck?
Shorter than a Warp Tour set. I like,
I was
and I'm sure
so
they got paid pretty
I
well.
was so disappointed in that.
Yeah, that's gotta be hard for, well, you and I both would have, like, that's the band I would want to go see most of Smashing Pumpkins, Green Day and Rancid. Like, you
I
can even
hate
put that
Smashing
bill around.
Pumpkins. All right, let's wrap this thing up. I have to go take a walk with my kid and then
Yeah.
do my live stream at 8:30. But yeah, man, that was fun, dude. I think overall both of these records were incredibly refreshing to hear as a 43-year-old and not like a youngster that's like just full of angst and anger. And I kind of enjoy that my palate is changing. I think it's great that my tastes are evolving. I think that at least for the health of my channel and then my mental state, I think it's good to change a little bit. I don't change a lot of things. I don't change the way I dress, and I don't change the way I eat very often. So, like, music is another big part of my life. It's cool that I can. I'm open to just evolving. I don't know. Some people don't think it's okay. Some people do. Whatever. Let me know how you hate me in the comments.
And one last word I'll say on both these albums. I think they're really good albums if you want to just see the sources, the original forms of both of these bands, because
Right.
it's not one of the things like they were a metal band and then they turned into this band. Both of these debut albums are early, just proto versions of the bands that they would become. So I think if you're a fan of either band, even if you don't love listening to debut albums, that's an interesting thing. I think they're worthwhile at least giving one listen to every now and then, just sort of contextualize each band.
I would say I would go even further and saying if you're a fan of either of these bands and you don't like either of these albums, then I would question why. Because
you're probably not actually a fan of
right,
these
I think
bands.
because I think that this would maybe not their peak, but I do think it's their most pure state.
If you found this objectionable, then it wouldn't be for you. Period.
Right, like this is the most pure Green Day record that I've heard. I think because it's just so clearly pure, youthful, vigor. And same with the Jawbreaker record. His vocals were so badass on that album, and I'm like, it's just like, well, that will never happen again. So enjoy this album.
Thank God music is captured in that ephemeral.
Yeah. This is a fun conversation, man. I hope we have a good time like this in a couple of weeks. Next week I'll be gone anyway, so it won't matter. So 2 weeks or so we'll be back with some Ramones core stuff. I'm gonna have a shitload of footage because I'm taking 2 phones, a GoPro, and a camera with like 4 different memory cards and a shitload of backup batteries because I've got press credentials for all this stuff. Let's go, dude. Don't hang up quite yet, Rob. I got one more quick question for you. All right, everybody, thank you so much for hanging out. We appreciate it. This is kind of a long episode. It's been a while since we've done one that kind of just went long. I think that's the sign of a good conversation. So thank you if you're still here. If you're not, whatever. All right, later, everybody.